What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Week 10 top 20 quarterback rankings. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe. But let's just dive right into Tier 1. Tier 1 is going to be Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Josh Allen on the season, QB2 in points per game, draws the nice matchup this week going up against the Dolphins, who are allowing the 8th most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. And then Lamar Jackson, he is the QB1 in points per game on the season. Looked really impressive in his return, 4 passing touchdowns. Didn't have the crazy rushing, but even without like a nuclear rushing ceiling, I still think he's a really strong fantasy option. He does have a tougher matchup this week going up against the Vikings, but it's really tough to rank Lamar any lower than this. Then moving into Tier 2, going to start it off with Justin Herbert going up against the Steelers. He has been super impressive over his last 3 games, had a strong start to the season. The midway point, at least so far this year, kind of struggled, didn't have those super high ceiling consistent games, but in his last 3, he has scored at least 25 fantasy points in all of them. He has 22 carries for 150 rushing yards, so he's showing off the upside with his legs. And then this is a really nice matchup against the Steelers, who are top 5 in points per game allowed to the quarterback position. I know they just gave Daniel Jones some fits, turned him over, I think, 5 times, 6 total turnovers. But that had been like a real outlier performance. They've had a couple of those, like the Patriots too. They forced a lot of turnovers, but pretty consistently they're giving up a lot of yardage per drive. I think Justin Herbert's going to have a day. I will also mention Joe Alt out for the season. That is a real bummer. I do think that's a hit to Justin Herbert, but it really doesn't change how I feel about him heading into Week 10. Then looking at Drake May, he goes up against the Buccaneers. He is still the quarterback 5 in points per game. It's funny because he actually had like a down overall day against the Falcons, had a pick, also got strip sacked. But like a down game for Drake May at this point is still passing for 260 yards, scoring 2 touchdowns. So still a really strong option in Tier 2. Then I've got Jalen Hurts going up against the Packers. Hurts has just been super consistent. He scored at least 19 fantasy points in 7 of his 8 games this season. And then it seems like the passing attack is starting to kind of turn a corner. He has thrown for 7 passing touchdowns in his last 2 games. And then the final player in Tier 2, it's going to be Jackson Dart going up against the Bears. And Dart has just been extremely productive since becoming the starter. I think it's a 5-game sample with him as the starter, averaging 22.3 points per game. His rushing production has been great. And then it's a good matchup against the Bears. We just saw them get torched by the Bengals. They're allowing the 7th most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. Now moving into Tier 3, in that same matchup with Jackson Dart, on the other side, we've got Caleb Williams going up against the Giants. He's coming off a really nice Week 9, 280 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 53 yards on the ground, and then also caught a receiving touchdown. So like production coming from everywhere. It's also a great matchup for Caleb. The Giants are allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, and then the Bears have the 5th highest implied point total. We've seen Caleb have these super strong games against really rough defenses. We saw it against the Cowboys. We just saw it against the Bengals. I wouldn't put the Giants in that tier, but they're certainly, kind of a bottom tier defense at this point. Then at quarterback 8, I've got Matthew Stafford, and Stafford's just been balling 25 plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games, and that's super impressive for someone who really has no rushing upside. Like, you just have to be consistently killing it through the air to get there, and especially the last 2 games, like 9 passing touchdowns in the last 2 games. It's not an amazing matchup against the 49ers, but it's certainly a defense that doesn't scare me at this point. After Stafford, I've got Bo Nix going up against the Raiders. Broncos with a respectable 25.5 implied points. They're 9.5-point favorites. Bo Nix has been very good in his last 3 games, 40, 23.8, and 18.5 points. Now, a lot of that has kind of been like late in the game, 4th quarter comebacks are kind of pulling away. Probably not going to be in that type of game script against the Raiders, but I also just think this offense is going to be fine against this Las Vegas defense. Quarterback 10, I've got Baker Mayfield coming off the bye, and he had a really strong start to the season. First 6 games, 20.9 points per game. Last 2, he's really struggled, 7.6 points per game. He's been inaccurate. He's kind of had happy feet in the pocket, and the weapons probably still aren't going to be super healthy. Mike Evans out. Not expecting McMillan to come back. We'll see about Godwin. I do think he'll have a healthier version of Buka, but it's also just not an amazing matchup here against the Patriots. So I think back end QB1 is pretty fair. Then we've got Daniel Jones coming off that 5 turnover game against the Steelers. What's kind of funny is that despite turning the ball over 5 times, he still scored, I think, 14 fantasy points. And he has scored at least 14 points in 8 of his 9 games this season. Also showcased, a pretty consistent ceiling, 22 plus points in 5 of his 9 games this season. I'm not super worried about the Colts' kind of offensive clunker in week 9. I think, teams have rough games. It's kind of bound to happen. They're not a team that's set up super well to play from behind. And if not able to run the ball, it's not going to look great. But that's really the one time we've seen it. Jones maybe struggled a little bit against the Rams, but still someone who I like in the back end QB1 area. And then the last guy in this tier, Jared Goff going up against the Commanders. This is just a great matchup. The Commanders are allowing the 3rd most points per game to the quarterback position. The Lions have a very high 29 implied points. That's the 2nd highest this week. So Jared Goff, really strong play. Then looking at tier 4, going to start off this tier with Sam Darnold, who's been absolutely balling. Got to put some respect on his name. Week 9, 21 of 24 for 330 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's gone for at least 20 fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. Then I've got Justin Fields going up against the Browns. I know Aaron Glenn's kind of playing the game of oh, we don't know who the starter is. We're not going to announce it, until we absolutely have to. And that's fine. I can see the potential advantage he gets from that. It does just seem though, you just picked up your big win. You had this momentum coming into the bye. Why aren't you just stamping Justin Fields as the guy? Because my personal opinion is it's going to be Fields. If they didn't, I guess they did kind of commit to benching him, but he just led you to your first win. I don't think you're sitting that guy down. So I do think it's Justin Fields. The issue with Fields, though, is he's just always going to be on watch to get pulled for Tyrod Taylor. And he has been someone who's been a garbage time warrior. And it's just to the point where it's he might have those rough 3 quarters and he might just get yanked. He might not have the opportunity to save himself in the 4th. And we've seen, right, in 4 of his 7 games, he's gone for 20 plus points. In his other 3, he has scored under 5. So he very much has been boom or bust. I think high-end QB2 is a reasonable spot to have him. And then the last guy in this tier, going to go with Jordan Love, coming off just a pretty disappointing performance against the Panthers, had some questionable decisions. Losing that game is tough, but still this offense. I know he lost the weapons, Tucker Kraft, Matthew Golden potentially missing time, but I still think he's a fine, high-end to mid-tier QB2. Not the greatest matchup against the Eagles, but also has not been a death sentence this season. And then in my 5th and final tier, I'm starting it off with J.J. McCarthy. Had a pretty respectable performance in week 9, 3 total touchdowns, 18.9 fantasy points. On paper, this does look like a decent matchup. Ravens, 9th in points per game allowed to the quarterback position. I do think this defense, though, is better and healthier than they were kind of early on in the season, where they were having some really rough performances. I think JJ is going to have more on his plate this week. He could kind of play the quarterback game manager role, right? They had an early lead, just needed to hold on to it, just needed to make enough plays. This is a game where he might actually have to go above and beyond their 4.5-point dogs. I think he's going to have more on his shoulders. It'll be interesting to see if he can handle that. Then I've got Marcus Mariota going up against the Lions. Commanders' offense, honestly, is just depressing. Daniel Jones obviously going to be out, or not Daniel Jones, Jaden Daniels going to be out for a while. You've got Terry McLaurin, who's unlikely to play this week. Mariota's been fine in his starts, 15.9 points per game. Gives you a little bit of rushing upside. Commanders have a fine 20.5 implied points. And then the Lions have been a somewhat plus matchup for quarterbacks, 11th in points per game allowed. Then I've got Aaron Rodgers going up against the Chargers. Now, this has not been a good matchup for quarterbacks. Chargers, 4th fewest points per game allowed to the quarterback position. The Steelers are 3-point dogs, so potential pass-heavy game script. With the Steelers' defense kind of struggle bussing, we have seen the Steelers put more on Aaron Rodgers' plate. He's thrown for at least 30 pass attempts in each of his last 4 games. This is certainly a tier that I don't want to be starting, especially in your normal like 12-team leagues. But if you're desperate, I get it. Could have like a Mahomes, a Dak Prescott, or Joe Flacco on bye. So these could be the options on waivers. Then I got Trevor Lawrence, quarterback 19, going up against the Texans. T-Law has definitely turned it around over like the second half of the first half of the season. In his first 4 games, 12.3 points per game. Last 4, all the way up at 21.1. Now, he did have a pretty rough first game this season against the Texans. And this Texans defense is just really tough, especially for opposing quarterbacks. They're allowing the fewest fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. He's got banged up weapons. Travis Hunter obviously out. Brian Thomas Jr., we'll see. I'm kind of leaning towards him not playing this week. But they did just acquire Jacoby Myers, so he's a new addition there. I don't think he's going to be some sort of, savior here against the Texans. But T-Law had the rushing upside last week. You're just hoping he can do enough here against the Texans. And then the final player, my quarterback 20, it is McCorkle Jones going up against the Rams. Just been super solid, replacing Brock Purdy, 15.3 points per game as the starter. It is just a tough spot here against the Rams, who are allowing the 5th fewest points per game to the quarterback position. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 20. Stay tuned for my tight end and defense rankings coming out later today. If you guys enjoyed, smash the like button, subscribe. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.